Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Awesome. Today, we're going to be talking about Nike.
Nike, okay.
Yeah, but not like you'd expect.
Wow.
We've got excerpts from philknight's memoir, Shoedog.
Oh, right from the source.
Exactly. And let me tell you, it's a wild ride. Not the story I thought it'd be at all.
Really? What's so different?
Well, for one, he starts off talking about himself, like his own athletic dreams. He was a runner, but
I didn't know that.
yeah. But he realized pretty early on that he wasn't going to be, some Olympic champion or anything.
Makes sense. Everyone has to face that reality at some point, right? Even Phil Knight.
Totally.
Yeah.
But what's fascinating is that realization, kind of a dead end in a way, it actually sparked what he calls his crazy idea.
Okay, I'm intrigued. The crazy idea.
So picture this. He's in grad school,
Okay.
and he writes this research paper about how Japanese running shoes could actually disrupt the whole market.
Interesting. So that's where it all began.
Yeah. It was dominated by German brands back then.
Right.
But he saw this opportunity, this opening.
Almost like that realization, he wasn't going to be a star athlete himself.
Yeah.
It kind of lit the fire for a different kind of competition,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Like he channeled that drive into business.
Exactly.
That's super insightful.
Thanks.
So then he sets off on this trip around the world. It's clear he's searching for something.
At this point, yeah.
But even he might not have known what exactly.
I can relate to that.
Right, like just got to get out there and see what happens.
Absolutely.
He's reading philosophy, visiting historical sites, deep stuff. And then, bam, he lands in Hawaii.
Wait, what? Hawaii?
Hawaii. Such a left turn, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Doesn't seem to fit at all.
I know. But it says a lot about him, don't you think?
Absolutely. Like this mix of deep thought and then just impulsiveness, this willingness to jump into the unknown.
Exactly. And that detour to Hawaii,
It wasn't just a vacation.
no way. It was like formative. He had to hustle, selling encyclopedias door to door.
Door to door.
Right. He talks about how much he hated it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
All the rejection, constantly putting himself out there.
It's interesting, though, because he becomes this massive success later on.
Oh, you're so right. But he talks about this aversion to selling even later on.
That is interesting. Almost like a contradiction.
Totally. But despite that shyness, he clearly had this underlying drive and this knack for, like, honesty, too.
Yeah.
He ends up selling Dreyfus funds, which are, financial things.
Right, right.
And he points out that people trusted him specifically because he wasn't some slick salesman.
Huh. So it's like those early experiences with rejection.
Yeah.
They actually laid the groundwork for how he approached business, like being authentic.
Wow, that's a great point.
Thanks.
But of course, he doesn't stay in finance.
That crazy idea comes back.
Keeps nagging at him, yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, he takes the plunge.
So he goes for it.
He goes to Japan.
Yeah.
Navigating a totally different culture, trying to convince this company, Onitsuka, they made Tiger running shoes. He's trying to get them to give him a chance to let him sell their shoes in the U.S.
So that's how Tiger Shoes got to the U.S. through Phil Knight.
It all started with him. And that whole Japan trip, it's fascinating, this clash of cultures.
I bet.
Knight had to learn a whole new way of doing business.
Yeah. Totally different than American business, I'm sure.
Right. One based on respect and subtlety, not like the hard sell tactics that were common in the U.S.
Huh. So how'd he do? Was he able to adapt?
It seems like he was a quick study,
Okay.
picking up on the nuances, building those relationships, and eventually, yeah, he secured that deal.
Wow. So he gets the distribution rights for Tiger Shoes in the U.S.?
Yep. But picture this. He's back in the States,
Right.
working out of his parents' basement.
Haha. Classic.
I know, right? Selling shoes from the trunk of his car. Total underdog entrepreneur.
The American dream right there.
Yeah. But here's where things get really interesting. Enter Bill Bowerman.
Bowerman.
Yeah. His old track coach
No way.
becomes his partner.
What a pair.
Right. Talk about an unlikely duo. Bowerman, this super demanding, relentless innovator, becomes like the mastermind behind the early Nike shoe designs.
So Bowerman's the shoe guy.
Oh, absolutely. But their partnership agreement, it was so unique.
How so?
They literally flipped a coin to decide who'd be president of their company.
Seriously.
Seriously. It was called Blue Ribbon at the time.
Blue Ribbon. Nike. It's all coming together.
Right. It just shows their mutual respect, this shared ambition.
Makes sense. You got to have that trust when you're building something from scratch.
Totally. And then there's Jeff Johnson,
Who's Jeff Johnson?
employee number one. This quirky guy, obsessed with running, who becomes like crucial to building the whole brand.
Really? Employee number one.
He's writing these incredibly detailed letters to customers.
Letters, like actual handwritten letters.
Yeah, creating this real sense of community around their shoes.
Huh. I guess that was before social media and all that.
Right. Johnson really understood runners.
And Knight saw that.
Absolutely. Even in those early days, constantly struggling for cash, they were already thinking bigger picture,
That's smart.
building something more than just, a shoe company.
Yeah, like a movement or something.
Exactly.
So they opened their first retail store, right?
You do. But they're still battling cash flow problems, like constantly.
Always scrambling.
It's a good reminder that even like iconic brands, they start somewhere messy.
Definitely humbling.
Right. But Knight keeps pushing, driven by this vision, Yeah. And he takes this huge risk, takes the company public.
Whoa. Going public that early? That's bold.
It was, especially back then. But it needed the capital.
I can imagine. But going public, that opens you up to a whole new level of scrutiny.
For sure. And just when things seem like they're stabilizing, boom, betrayal.
Oh, no. What happened?
Onitsuka, the company that makes tiger shoes.
Right.
They decided to cut Nike off.
Seriously, after all that?
Yeah, and they decided to go directly to the U.S. market themselves.
Wow, that's cold.
Yeah.
What a blow.
Talk about a gut punch, right? But this is actually where the Nike brand we know today is born.
Oh, really? So out of this, huge setback.
Out of necessity, yeah.
Yeah.
This incredible challenge. Knight and his team, they call themselves the Butt Faces.
The butt faces.
I know, right? They have to, completely reinvent themselves.
Wow. What a story.
It's like that classic hero's journey,
Yeah.
They face this existential threat, and they come out stronger.
Oh, resilient.
Exactly. They find a new supplier, they embrace the name Nike, and they just double down on their commitment to innovation.
It's a real testament to that scrappy underdog spirit.
Totally. But this is just the beginning.
There's more.
Oh, yeah. It's about to get even crazier.
Yeah.
It's interesting how Knight's personal life kind of mirrors the company's journey.
How so?
He's dealing with burnout, the pressure from investors, and that constant struggle to balance, ambition and family life.
Yeah, that's always tough.
He even admits there were times he wished he'd stayed in accounting.
Haha. I bet we've all been there, right? That, what have I gotten myself into feeling?
Totally. But speaking of family, it's clear his wife, Penny, she played a huge role.
Oh, yeah.
Keeping him grounded through all the chaos. Her support seems to have been, unwavering.
That's so important. Having someone who believes in you, even when you doubt yourself.
Absolutely. Even when he was working insane hours dealing with constant stress, she was there.
Providing that stability.
Exactly.
Right.
A reminder of what really mattered outside of, the whirlwind of building this company.
Yeah, perspective.
Knight talks about how running was his escape.
Okay.
His way of processing everything that was going on.
Makes sense. A way to clear your head.
And it's through running that he forms this deep connection with Steve Prefontaine.
Prefontaine, the runner.
The legend. But you can almost feel the weight of Prefontaine's death in the book.
Yeah.
He died young, tragically.
That's right. I remember now.
It's like this sense of loss that Knight still carries.
Prefontaine wasn't just an athlete, though, right? He was like a symbol.
He represented the spirit of Nike, pushing limits,
It's interesting how certain people become almost larger than life.
Totally. But amidst all the personal grief, there are these huge wins for Nike.
Like what?
They finally win that lawsuit against Onitsuka.
Oh, that must have been a relief.
It was a defining moment, solidifying their independence. They start signing more athletes, too.
Like who?
Ilinastes, the tennis star.
Oh, yeah, I remember him.
He had this, rebellious vibe, kind of a rock star.
So Nike's gaining traction.
They are. But they're still the underdog compared to, Adidas.
That's where their marketing comes in, right?
Yeah.
They were really good at connecting with athletes.
It wasn't just about ads.
No.
Knight actually says he wasn't big on advertising early on.
Interesting. Why not?
He thought the product should speak for itself.
Huh. So it's like their authenticity. It
Yeah.
became their best marketing tool.
You're so right. They believed in the power of sport,
Pushing human potential.
and that came through in everything they did.
But even with all this success, money was still a problem.
A constant issue.
Really?
Nike was expanding like crazy, taking on debt. It's that classic dilemma. You need money to grow, but growth can, drain your funds.
It's a tough balancing act.
And then there's this crazy moment where Johnson, their trusted guy in the
It's
East,
right. Employee number one.
he accidentally bounces a check for over $1 million.
Whoa. That's a big check to bounce.
It could have been disastrous, especially with their Japanese partners, Nisho.
So what happened?
It speaks to their relationship with Nisho,
Yeah.
that they were willing to bail them out.
Wow, that's incredible. They must have had a lot of trust in Knight.
It's rare in business, especially when so much is at stake. But that bailout came with a price.
Oh. What was that?
Nisho insisted on auditing Nike's books.
Makes sense. They wanted to make sure things were in order.
Right, and that's when things get really messy.
What do you mean?
They uncover accounting discrepancies,
No.
stuff that could have serious consequences.
Wow. So this was a major wake-up call.
Totally. They had to become more financially disciplined, put stricter controls in place.
Sounds like a turning point.
It was. Not just in terms of their finances.
But in how they ran the company as a whole.
Exactly. They couldn't just rely on gut instinct anymore.
They needed systems, a more professional approach.
Right. And all this is happening while they're still dealing with that FBI investigation.
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that. It's like a constant shadow hanging over them.
It makes you realize the pressure they were under.
How close they were to losing it all.
Exactly. But Knight rallies his team, reminding them there is no finish line.
He's good at that, rallying the troops.
He fostered this us against the world mentality.
That underdog spirit.
And just when it seems like they've caught a break, another threat emerges.
What?
The yen starts fluctuating wildly, throwing the global market into chaos.
Uh-oh. That's got to be a big deal for Nike.
Huge. They were so reliant on Japanese manufacturing.
Right.
It forced them to diversify, look beyond Japan for production.
A whole new set of challenges.
Exactly. It wasn't just about finding new factories.
No.
It was about navigating different cultures, building relationships, logistics on a global scale,
They were learning on the fly.
adapting constantly.
Mm-hmm.
And then they set their sights on China.
China. Interesting. That's a big move.
In hindsight, yeah, it was brilliant. But even then, it wasn't easy.
What were some of the hurdles?
Cultural differences, bureaucratic stuff,
Yeah.
quality control.
Makes sense. A whole new learning curve. It's amazing they just kept pushing forward.
I know, right? Taking on these massive challenges, always looking for that next opportunity. But Knight, he was facing his own struggles too.
Oh, yeah. Personal stuff.
He talks about battling burnout, how difficult it was to find balance.
It's refreshing to hear that kind of honesty.
Right. It reminds you success doesn't make you immune to, those very human struggles.
Absolutely. It makes his story even more relatable.
He's not just this, business superhero.
He's a flawed individual figuring things out.
Exactly. And it's in this part of the book, we see a more introspective side of him.
Oh, so?
He realizes his sons aren't that into sports.
Oh, interesting. That must have been tough for him, given his background.
It was. It speaks to his evolution, though, his willingness to let go of certain expectations.
Embrace his children for who they are.
Exactly. Not who he wanted them to be.
That's a subtle but powerful moment in the book.
It shows how personal growth often happens alongside professional growth, even if it's not always obvious at the time.
So true. You're constantly evolving, both personally and professionally.
And while Knight's going through all this internal stuff, Nike keeps pushing forward,
They're on a roll now.
developing new products, expanding their marketing.
Becoming a global force.
It's like this unstoppable momentum. They're
Yeah.
constantly innovating, bringing in new talent, creating a culture that rewards, risk-taking.
You're not just selling shoes anymore.
Yeah.
They're selling an idea, a lifestyle.
Exactly. And it's working.
Yeah.
Their commitment to innovation is really starting to pay off.
Give me an example.
They introduced the Tailwind, this shoe, with revolutionary air sole technology.
Air sole, that's huge. That's like a Nike trademark now.
It was a game changer. And get this, the technology came from an aerospace engineer.
Seriously,
Yeah.
an aerospace engineer designing shoes.
It's like they took something from a completely different field and applied it to shoes.
So typical of Nike, thinking outside the box.
They were always looking for new ways to do things.
Always pushing the boundaries, and they kept signing athletes who embodied that spirit.
Oh, yeah. Pushing limits, breaking records.
But just as they're hitting their stride, another financial crisis hits.
It seems like a recurring theme for them, right?
That balancing act between ambition and financial stability.
They're growing too fast, taking on too much debt.
Cash flow problems again.
Exactly. And Knight is forced to make a difficult decision.
What's that?
Take Nike public. It'll secure their financial future, but it'll also change the company forever.
It's the end of an era.
In a way, that transition from scrappy startup to, publicly traded company, it's never easy,
A lot of companies struggle with that.
but it also shows their resilience. And through it all, Knight keeps emphasizing the importance of people,
He talks about that a lot, right?
how crucial it was to surround himself with talented individuals.
Who shared his vision?
Exactly. It's a reminder that success is never a solo act.
It's about building a team.
Trusting your people, empowering them.
Couldn't agree more. And just as they're navigating this new chapter, another challenge emerges. So another challenge. What was it this time?
Well, this time it wasn't so much a single event, more like a growing pain, you know?
Okay, I'm listening.
Knight really grapples with this idea of how to maintain that butt-face culture as the company explodes in size.
Right. They can't exactly be working out of someone's basement anymore.
Exactly. It's like, how do you keep that scrappy, innovative energy alive when you've got thousands of employees, investors breathing down your neck?
Yeah, you almost have to become a different kind of company.
And Knight's super honest about his own struggles as a leader during this period.
Oh, what does he say?
He talks about how he tended to withdraw, become less hands-on, especially when he was stressed out.
I can see how that would be a problem as things got more complicated.
Yeah, I mean, that hands-off approach might have worked in the early days when they were a small, tight-knit group.
Everyone knew what they were doing, that kind of thing.
Right. But as Nike grew, he realized he had to adapt, be more communicative, more involved, to really guide them through this next phase.
It's like leveling up your leadership style.
Exactly. So they're growing up, becoming more corporate. Does that mean they lost their edge, though?
Well, there's this funny anecdote about Knight trying to institute a dress code.
A dress code for the butt faces.
Yeah, much to the displeasure of some of the old guard.
Like Strasser.
Oh, yeah, Strasser, known for his, shall we say, unique fashion choices.
It's like a symbolic moment, right? This shift from freewheeling startup to a more buttoned-up organization.
And it's not like they didn't have any more stumbles along the way, products that flopped, you know?
Oh, like what?
Well, Knight talks about the LD1000, a shoe that Bowerman himself was really pushing.
Really, Bowerman?
Yeah. But it just didn't connect with consumers. It happens.
It's a good reminder that everyone makes mistakes, even the most innovative companies.
Absolutely. It's all part of the process.
But for every flop, there's a tailwind, right?
That's a great way to put it. And the tailwind with that air sole is a great example of their innovation.
It's crazy that the technology came from an aerospace engineer.
I know, right? It shows how they were always willing to look outside the box for inspiration, and they kept signing athletes who embodied that Nike spirit, too.
Pushing limits, like Prefontaine.
Prefontaine's influence is undeniable, for sure. But even with all the success, the financial struggles never really went away.
It's wild how, even after going public, they still face these near-death experiences.
Really? That close to bankruptcy?
And Knight talks about it pretty openly. Makes you realize how volatile the business world can be.
Definitely. Even with great products and a strong brand, you're always vulnerable.
But Knight always seemed to find a way to pull them through.
He surrounded himself with really capable people.
And never lost sight of how important those partnerships were.
That's key, building a team you can trust.
So, after all that, this deep dive into Nike's wild ride of a beginning,
Quite a journey.
what are your biggest takeaways?
Oh, man, so many. The importance of resilience, for one.
Never giving up.
Exactly, and embracing challenges, finding your purpose, and just going for it.
And the power of innovation, of course.
Always pushing the boundaries.
Never settling. But it's not just about the business side, right?
Right. Knight's honesty about his personal struggles, that really resonated with me.
His burnout, the challenges of family life,
It reminds you that everyone's human, even these larger-than-life figures.
that success comes with its own set of challenges.
Makes the story that much more relatable. It's not just a straight line to the top, you know? It's messy, it's complicated, but that's what makes it interesting.
Absolutely. And for everyone listening, what stood out to you most about Nike's beginnings? Did anything surprise you about Phil Knight himself? He talks about running as a metaphor for life,
Always another hill to climb.
another finish line to cross. So
Yeah.
think about this. Does that metaphor apply to the journey of Nike itself? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and never stop pushing your limits.